The black SUV was in my spot, B2 level, my name on the plaque, peak hour, cold rain, and I was late for the board. I tapped the glass, trying to keep my voice even. "Sir, that's my spot." The window lowered. I stared into the familiar gray eyes of my grandfather. "If you can't hold a parking spot," he rasped, "how can you hold a company?" He tapped his cane. A green light blinked. I saw the red eye of a ceiling camera. This was a test, and the start of a war. My name is Riley Carrington. I'm 29, a lead analyst at Kestrel and Larch Holdings, and I was, without question, completely and humiliatingly late. The Kestrel and Larch building shot half a mile into the Grayford sky, a monument of glass and steel reflecting the bruised, rainy twilight. But down here, on level B2 of the subterranean garage, it was a different world. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete, cold exhaust, and the faint, ozonic hum of high-voltage chargers. Cold October rain lashed in through the ventilation grills, hissing as it hit the floor. The only light came from the long, flickering neon tubes overhead, casting a sickly green glow that made the puddles on the floor look like chemical spills. Every sound was amplified. The distant squeal of tires on epoxy, the heavy thud of the hydraulic elevator, the relentless drumming of the storm above. My phone vibrated against my palm, a nervous, angry buzz. I didn't need to look. It was Slack, the message, which had arrived 60 seconds ago as I was pulling off the freeway, was from Sloan Denby, our COO, and my stepmother. "Sloan Denby, board is moving to the Apex room at 5 p.m. Need you ready to present. ETA." It wasn't a question. It was a warning, a digital tap on the glass. "You are failing. I am watching." I was the lead analyst on the Larchline project, and today was the day I was supposed to present the quarterly risk assessment. The numbers didn't add up. The projections felt inflated, and I knew Sloan and our CEO, Damon Pike, wanted me to streamline the data. They wanted a performance, not an analysis. And my lateness was handing them the perfect excuse to paint me as unprepared, unreliable. My knuckles were white on the steering wheel. I swung my sedan around the final concrete pillar, heading for the one sanctuary I had in this entire building, Spot 47. It wasn't just a parking space, it was a declaration. In the brutally hierarchical world of Kestrel and Larch, your parking spot was your rank. B4 was for the masses, B3 for junior execs, B2 was for senior leadership, and reserved, named spots on B2, were for the elite. R. Carrington, Spot 47, was mine. A perk I had negotiated fiercely. A small piece of territory that Sloan couldn't touch. Until today. A gleaming black SUV, something expensive and aggressive that looked more like a diplomatic vehicle than a commuter car, was sitting squarely in my spot. Its windows were tinted to an illegal, obsidian black. No lights, no driver visible. Just sitting there, occupying my space. I stopped, blocking the lane. A raw, primal spike of anger shot through me, so hot it eclipsed the anxiety about the meeting. This wasn't an accident. No one accidentally parked in a named spot on B2. This was a message. This was a power play. I put the car in park, the engine idling with a low growl. The green neon flickered, casting distorted highlights across the wet black paint of the SUV. I could call security. That was the protocol. Let them handle it. Tow the vehicle. But that would take 20 minutes, and I had negative 60 seconds. I grabbed my bag, stepped out of my car, and slammed the door. The sound cracked through the damp air, sharp and final. My heels clicked on the concrete as I walked to the driver's side of the SUV. The rain misted my face from the vents, cold and sharp. I didn't pound. I didn't yell. I tapped, 3 sharp, measured raps with my knuckle on the tinted glass. "Excuse me," I said, my voice tight, professional, but loud enough to carry. "You're in my spot." Nothing. The engine was silent, but I could feel the presence of someone inside. The air felt static. I schooled my features into a mask of polite inquiry. the one I used when a director was trying to feed me bullshit numbers. I tapped again, harder this time. "Sir, this is a reserved space. You need to move." A faint click. Then, with an impossibly slow, electric whine, the window began to lower. It slid down inch by inch, revealing the interior. The smell of old, expensive leather and cedarwood hit me, a scent I hadn't smelled in years. And then I saw him. The face that emerged from the shadows was all sharp angles and pale skin, dominated by a pair of cold, steel-gray eyes that missed nothing. He wasn't the frail octogenarian the company memos described. He was a bird of prey, watching. Harlan Carrington, my grandfather, the man who had built Kestrel and Larch from nothing, the titan who had supposedly retired 5 years ago to focus on his philanthropic endeavors. The ghost who, according to Sloan and Damon, was no longer involved in day-to-day operations. He looked at me, his head tilted slightly. A thin, humorless smile touched his lips. His voice, when it came, was a dry rasp, like stones grinding together. "Riley." "Grandfather," I said. The word felt foreign, heavy. "What are you doing here? You're in my spot." "Am I?" He looked past me at the small, metal plaque bolted to the concrete wall. R. Carrington, Spot 47. It says, Carrington, a named right. He turned his gaze back to me, and it was like being pinned by an insect collector. The question is, how do you handle a named right when it's challenged? The anxiety about the meeting evaporated, replaced by a cold, clarifying anger. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a senile old man getting lost. This was a test, the hook I'd swallowed in the email, the late-night data revisions, the passive-aggressive slacks from Sloan. It was all connected to this moment, to this man. I took a deep breath, forcing the tremor from my voice. My right is clear. The protocol is equally clear. If you won't move, I'll call security and have the vehicle towed. Harlan Carrington watched me, his expression unreadable. The smile was gone. He seemed to be weighing my response, measuring my spine. I could feel the seconds ticking away, each one a hammer blow against my career. The board was waiting. Sloan was waiting. He shook his head, a tiny, sharp movement. Security. He tasted the word, found it lacking. They follow rules. They don't make them. They don't enforce them. They are tools. You're not a tool. Are you, Riley? "I'm late for a board meeting," I said, my voice dropping. "Move the car, please." He leaned forward slightly. In the dim green light, I saw his hand resting on the polished mahogany head of a cane. He didn't move it. He simply tapped his index finger on it. Once, twice. Then, he lifted the entire cane an inch and brought the metal-tipped base down hard onto the floor of the SUV. It wasn't a loud sound, but it was definitive. Instantly, a small green LED on the garage's main security panel, mounted on the pillar 10 feet away, blinked once. It was a light I'd never seen active, an override. At the same moment, I caught a flicker of movement above me. I looked up. Tucked into the concrete beams, a security camera I had never noticed before was aimed directly at us. Its small red recording light was on, a single, malevolent eye. He had been recording the entire interaction. The SUV's engine purred to life, a deep, powerful rumble that vibrated through the soles of my shoes. The window began to slide up, the electric whine sounding like a final judgment. "If you give up your spot," Harlan's voice rasped through the closing gap, "you give up your seat." The glass sealed shut, leaving me staring at my own distorted reflection, green-lit and furious. The SUV's reverse lights flashed white, and it backed out of my spot with a smoothness that was almost insulting. It didn't drive away. It just pulled into the empty, unreserved lane 10 yards back, its engine idling, its blacked-out windows watching me. I stood frozen for a second, my mind racing. If you give up your spot, you give up your seat. My phone vibrated in my hand. I looked down, expecting another jab from Sloan. It was a text, from an unknown number. The message was one short, brutal line. "He's right. You almost failed." I stared at the screen, the words blurring against the green glow of the garage. My heart was hammering, a frantic, trapped bird against my ribs. This wasn't just my grandfather playing mind games. This wasn't a random encounter. This was coordinated. Someone else was watching. Someone else was texting. A cold dread, sharper than the rain, settled over me. I got back in my car, my hands shaking so badly it took me 2 tries to get the key into the ignition. My car was old, analog, a relic in this digital fortress. I pulled into spot 47, the car fitting perfectly between the white lines. The plaque bearing my name seemed to mock me. I turned off the engine, plunging the car into silence. The only sounds were the rain and the distant hum of the black SUV, which remained in the lane, waiting. I looked at the text message again. "You almost failed." This wasn't a challenge for a parking spot. This wasn't just about a board meeting. This was an initiation, a test. And as I sat there, the smell of concrete and my grandfather's cologne clinging to the air, I knew with absolute certainty that the first test was over, and the real one had just begun. The elevator ride from B2 was an ascent from a cold, primal cave into a sterile, calculated heaven. The grime of the garage gave way to the lobby of Kestrel and Larch Holdings, a 3-story atrium of Arctic white marble, brushed steel, and impossible amounts of glass. It was designed to awe, to diminish, to make you feel fortunate to even be breathing its filtered air. Etched into a slab of gray granite so large it must have been lowered in by crane before the roof was put on, was the company motto, "Radical Transparency." I had always found that slogan to be a particularly cold piece of irony. This company was about as transparent as a black hole. My heels clicked, the sound too loud in the cavernous space. I was walking, but I felt like I was still in the garage. The image of that small red camera light burned into my memory. The anonymous text message was heavy in my pocket. "He's right. You almost failed." Radical transparency, right. The architect of our opaque transparency was waiting for me upstairs. Sloane Denby, my stepmother, the COO, Sloane, who had married my father after my mother died, and then, after my father's own, conveniently, fatal heart attack, had pivoted to become my grandfather's most trusted executive, until he retired, of course. Sloane was a woman built of elegant, sharp angles. She favored severe black dresses, hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful, and a smile that never, ever reached her eyes. It was a thin, brief compression of the lips, deployed to signal the end of a conversation, usually one she had just won. Her most memorable trait, however, was her jewelry. She wore a collection of heavy, custom-made silver and platinum bracelets. They were her soundtrack. You always heard Sloane before you saw her. I remembered my first week as a junior analyst. I'd made a minor calculation error. She hadn't called me into her office. She'd come to my desk in the open-plan bullpen. I heard the jingle clack of her bracelets approaching, a sound like elegant, expensive chains. She didn't speak. She just stood behind me until I felt the heat of her presence. Then, her hand, cold as marble, landed on my shoulder, clacked jingle pat. "We don't make mistakes here, Riley," she'd murmured, the smile firmly in place for the rest of the bullpen to see. "We just don't," clack jingle pat, a gesture of mentorship, of female solidarity. It felt like a threat. If Sloane was the public face of our corporate culture, CEO Damon Pike was its hidden engine. Damon loved war rooms. He despised the glass-walled conference areas. His own office, the bunker as we called it, was in the building's core, windowless, soundproofed, and accessible only by a private elevator. Damon was all charisma, expensive suits, and a booming voice, but he believed in secrecy as a religion. "Transparency, Riley," he'd told me once at a dreadful company gala, his hand gripping my elbow a little too tightly, "is for the audience. It's a performance. The real work, the winning work, is done in the dark." Sloane performed transparency, Damon weaponized the lack of it. They were the perfect partnership, and for the last 6 months, they had been united in their singular focus, the Larchline project. Larchline was our flagship fintech venture, a predictive analytics platform that was supposed to revolutionize high-frequency trading. It was Damon's baby, and Sloan was its proud godmother. The projected Q3 profits were astronomical. The press releases were glowing. The stock was climbing on the hype alone. The problem was, the numbers were lies. I knew this because I was the lead analyst assigned to run the final risk assessment. 3 weeks ago, buried deep in server logs, I found the hairline crack. It started as a feeling. The data was too clean. The user adoption rates, the transactional velocities, they were perfect, too perfect. I spent a weekend digging, cross-referencing raw data logs against the cleaned data sets that were being fed into the executive dashboards, and I found it. It wasn't a rounding error, it was forgery. Someone, likely a senior data engineer working on Damon's direct orders, had duplicated data blocks from our most successful Q1 launch, pasted them into the Q3 projections, and then run a light algorithm over them to change the values by a few decimal points. It was lazy, arrogant, and just clever enough to pass a cursory audit. They were inflating our success by nearly 40%. They weren't just projecting profits, they were inventing them. My first thought was to go to Harlan. But how? The man was, according to everyone, a ghost. The official HR narrative, whispered with sympathetic tones in the hallways and reinforced by Sloan at company town halls. We wish Harlan all the best. His health is our priority. Was that the old man had finally succumbed to dementia. He was senile, a tragic figurehead who couldn't be trusted with a balance sheet, let alone a company. So I did the next logical thing. I took my findings to Sloan. I booked a meeting in one of the smaller glass conference rooms. I laid out the spreadsheets, the server logs, the evidence. I showed her the exact lines of code, the timestamps. Sloan listened, her face a perfect mask of calm concern. Her bracelets were silent. She steepled her fingers, her silver rings catching the light. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial, "We women must stick together, hush. Riley, this is excellent work, truly. Your attention to detail is remarkable." She smiled. That thin, sharp line. "But you're missing the forest for the trees. You're looking at the data. I'm looking at the story." "The story is fraud." "Sloan," I said, my voice colder than I intended. "The story," she corrected me gently, "is confidence. Damon has secured a second-round funding commitment based on these projections. This is high-level strategy. Darling, it's not about micro-errors. It's about the macro narrative." She then delivered the line that had been chilling my bones for 3 weeks. "I need you to simplify this report for the board. Just clean it up. Focus on the top line. The Larchline platform is a success. We don't need to muddy the water with technical validation issues. Simplify." The word hung in the air-conditioned room, sterile and venomous. She was asking me to co-sign the lie. She was making me an accomplice. If I presented this simplified report, my name would be on the digital dotted line. When the inevitable crash came, the fraud would be mine. Now, I was walking toward the meeting that would be my execution or my coronation as a liar. The Apex Room. The Apex Room was Kestrel and Larch's most obscene monument to its own slogan. It was a perfect cube of laminated, soundproof glass, suspended by steel cables in the center of the main atrium, 20 floors up. Everyone on the surrounding balconies could see who was inside. They could see the gestures, the posturing, the tension, but they couldn't hear a single word. It was a silent movie theater for corporate assassinations. This is where Sloan and Damon had chosen to hear my simplified report. They wanted a public display. They wanted the entire company to see me, the lead analyst, R. Carrington, signing off on the Larchline success story. I stopped at the base of the private elevator that serviced the Apex. My heart was hammering. The confrontation in the garage replayed in my mind. Heard he asked a VP if they still made typewriters. Sloan says he doesn't even recognize his own son's picture anymore. Completely senile. Tragic. The rumors, the whispers, the careful company-wide campaign to paint Harlan Carrington as a feeble old man. I thought of the cold, steel-gray eyes in that SUV, the precise, strategic question, how do you handle a named right when it's challenged? I thought of the cane tap, the green override light, the knowledge of the camera. He wasn't senile, he was testing me. A cold realization washed over me, so intense it made me dizzy. The garage wasn't a random test of character, it was a simulation. The parking spot was the Larch Line data. My name was on both. Both were mine, my responsibility, and in both cases, a superior, more powerful Carrington had shown up to take it from me, to challenge my right to it. Harlan was asking me, forcing me to answer, would I defend my territory? Would I call security? Or would I fold? Would I protect my data? Or would I simplify it? If you give up your spot, you give up your seat. The anonymous text from Spot 47, the camera, the coordinated nature of it all. It wasn't just Sloan and Damon setting a trap for me. This entire building was a stage. My grandfather, far from being senile, was a puppet master in the shadows, pulling strings I was only just beginning to see. He hadn't just built the stage, he had wired it. The elevator doors opened with a soft whoosh. I stepped inside, my reflection staring back at me from the polished steel. The Larch Line fraud wasn't just a problem I had discovered, it was the bait, and Sloan and Damon were the primary targets. But what, I wondered as the elevator began its silent ascent, was my role in this play? Was I the star? The witness? Or was I the designated scapegoat? The one who would be left on the glass stage when the lights came up and the audience realized the story was a lie. The doors opened. The apex room was ahead, a glowing cube of light. Sloan and Damon were already seated, their silhouettes sharp against the city skyline. Sloan looked at her watch, then up at me, and smiled that thin, sharp smile. The show was about to begin. I didn't go to the Apex meeting. The Slack message from Sloan was a summons, but it was not the one that mattered. As I stood by the elevator bank, my pulse hammering from the garage confrontation and the implications of the Larch Line fraud, a second vibration hit my phone. It wasn't Slack. It was a calendar alert from a ghost. H. Carrington, inactive, has invited you to review. Location, penthouse. Time, now. The penthouse, the floor my grandfather had occupied for 30 years. It had been dark for 5. According to company lore, it was a shrine, a museum, preserved exactly as he'd left it. Sloan had once called it a sentimental necessity, in a tone that suggested she'd rather have it gutted and turned into a yoga studio. I sent Sloan a brief, vague message. Pulled into a legacy file review, we'll circle back, and walked past the Apex elevator to the private express car at the end of the hall, the one that serviced the penthouse. My standard keycard flashed red. Denied. I stood there, feeling foolish, of course. The elevator dinged softly. The doors slid open anyway. Inside, the car was dark, paneled in a rich, near-black mahogany that smelled of fossilized cigar smoke and old leather, and he was there, waiting. Harlan Carrington was not in the black SUV. He was standing, perfectly still, his back to the far wall. His heavy wool overcoat was gone, revealing a perfectly tailored 3-piece suit of charcoal gray. He looked less like a feeble retiree and more like the building's structural core. His cane was not on the floor. It was resting horizontally across his outstretched, black-gloved hands, presented like a ceremonial offering. The doors closed, sealing us in the wood-paneled box. The car did not move. "You were late," he said. His voice was not the raspy growl from the garage. It was quiet, clear, and cut through the silence like a scalpel. "My spot was taken," I replied, my voice equally quiet. "It was, and you hesitated. You thought about protocol. You thought about calling for help." He said the word help as if it were a weakness. "I have a board meeting," I countered, gesturing upward toward the apex room. Sloane is waiting. We're presenting Larchline. Sloane is bait. Larchline is the trap. You're the cheese. He tilted his head. And I, he added, am the exterminator. He stepped forward. The elevator remained motionless. You're thinking about the fraud, the data, that's the what? You're ignoring the where? Tomorrow, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Reread the Kestrel and Larch parking garage contract, specifically, the joint tenancy rights and the surveillance addendum. I stared at him. The single most valuable project in the company was a house of cards. My career was on the line, and he was giving me homework on parking validation. Grandfather, with respect, I don't see what the garage lease has to do with data fraud. You don't, do you? He didn't sound disappointed, just observational. He lifted the heavy cane. You think this is for walking? He held it up to the dim light. His gloved thumb and forefinger gripped the heavy, ornate silver head, a stylized hawk, the kestrel of our logo. He twisted it. A sharp metallic click. He unscrewed the head and pulled it away. It wasn't a sword cane, it was a microphone. The top of the hollowed-out mahogany shaft was packed with technology, a high-fidelity, directional mic, a battery pack, and, I saw as he tilted it, a tiny, recessed microSD card slot. My blood turned to ice. The tap in the garage, the green light. It wasn't an override. It was record. The B2 level, he said, his voice resonating in the small space, is the most acoustically perfect chamber in this entire building. All that concrete and rebar. It channels sound. For 5 years. I've sat in that SUV, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for 8, and I have listened. He screwed the head back on, the click hiss of the threads sealing the secret. This building is a monument to radical transparency, he sneered, quoting the lobby wall. Sloane and Damon love the glass. They love the performance. They forget that glass reflects. They forget that concrete listens. He held the cane upright. You want to find the truth, Riley? Stop looking in the glass rooms where they perform. Go to the places they think are beneath them, where people are careless. They speak the truth, and everyone is careless in the garage. He reached into his waistcoat, a pocket watch chain gleaming. He didn't pull out a watch. He produced a key card. It was heavy, brushed steel, not the flimsy white plastic we all carried. This one was old school, with a thick black magnetic stripe. The front was etched with 2 letters, H.C. Sloane watches the lobbies. Damon logs the passenger elevators. They watch the front door. He slid the card across the brass control panel to me. It felt cold, heavy. This is the building under the building, the service corridors, the engineering routes, the maintenance shafts, the paths the concrete finishers walked. They don't watch those. They don't even know they all still connect. What am I supposed to do with this? Go back down, he said. Take the stairs. Use the technical routes. Reread that contract. And wait. Wait for what? For the truth. The elevator dinged again. Though he hadn't pressed a button, the doors opened. We were still on the same floor. He stepped out into the lobby, a shadow moving against shadows. Grandfather, I said, stopping him. The rumors, they all say you're unwell, that you're senile. Harlan Carrington looked back at me, his face half hidden in the gloom. A very faint, very cold smile touched his lips. Never interrupt your enemy when they are building your cover story. The doors slid shut. I stood there for a long moment, the steel card heavy in my hand. The air thrummed with the implications. I was holding a key, a skeleton key to the entire kingdom. I didn't go back to my desk. I found the nearest fire door. The H card didn't just unlock it. The digital reader at the top of the frame clicked open silently, without the usual access granted beep. I stepped into the stairwell. The air was different, dusty, cold. The sound of the building's HVAC system was a low, mechanical roar. I was inside the walls. I descended 20 floors, my heels echoing on the metal steps. I found a small, windowless IT junction room on B1. I plugged my laptop into an Ethernet port, swiped the HC card through my reader, and a new network drive appeared on my desktop, KNL Archive SS. I clicked it, and I waited. 20 minutes passed. The silence was absolute. Then, a ping. An email, in my personal inbox. The sender was unspecified. The subject was a single word: welcome. The body was a string of text: archives, sys, AUD, B2, CAM, TS 48H, prior. And at the bottom, 2 words: Spot 47. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I navigated through the archive. The file wasn't a document. It was a video, time-stamped 2 days ago, from a camera I'd never seen, hidden in a ventilation duct near the B2 elevator bank. I hit play. The video was grainy, shot in the same sickly green neon as the garage, but the audio was crystal clear. Harlan had not exaggerated. It was Sloan and Damon. They were standing right by my spot 47, waiting for the private elevator. Sloane's bracelets were clacking nervously. "Still not comfortable with it," Sloane was saying. "She's not an idiot. Damon, she's Harlan's blood. She'll find the duplication." "I'm counting on it." Damon's voice. He was laughing. "Let her find it. Let her get agitated. Let her bring it to you, just like she did." "And the board meeting?" "The board meeting," Damon said, "is the stage. She'll present her concerns. You'll look supportive. I'll look concerned. We'll thank her for her diligence." "And then?" Sloane asked. "And then," Damon said, his voice dropping, "we let the anonymous SEC complaint we filed against ourselves work its magic. When the investigators come, they won't find our fingerprints. They'll find the logs from the lead analyst who was simplifying the data all along." My stomach hollowed out. They used my logins?" "Her credentials were used to make the final alterations," Damon said, answering my unspoken question. "It owes me a favor, as far as the servers are concerned. She is the fraud." Sloane was silent for a moment. Then, "It's clean. When the stock tanks, we blame her, fire her, and buy out the panicked shareholders. Harlan's entire trust. It all becomes ours." Damon clapped his hands together, a sharp, ugly sound that echoed in the concrete box. "Exactly. We let her find the problem. We let her think she's a whistleblower. Then we pin the whole damn thing on the kid. It's done. And we take the company." "The kid?" My face was burning. A hot, shameful flush that started in my chest and flooded my entire head. I wasn't an analyst. I wasn't a Carrington. I was the kid, the scapegoat, the sacrificial lamb they were fattening for the slaughter. The entire Larchline project, my promotion to lead it, Sloane's fake mentorship, the discovery of the fraud. It was all a script, a setup, a war that had been meticulously planned, and I was the designated casualty. My laptop pinged again. A new email from Spot 47. Subject: "Now you see?" Body: "Contract. Addendum C. Surveillance." They signed it. They gave him the right to record. They built their own gallows. Time to build the trapdoor. Spot 47. My hands were shaking, but it wasn't fear. It was rage. A cold, clean, structural rage. The war had been decided. My role had been cast. But Harlan Carrington had just given me a new script. My rage was no longer hot. It was a cold, clean, structural thing. It was the fluorescent light in this windowless IT room on B1. It was the hum of the server racks, the precise, logical click of my own keyboard. Damon's voice from the video file was still echoing in my head. "We pinned the whole damn thing on the kid." They saw me as a kid, a piece to be moved, a scapegoat. They didn't see the lead analyst who had built the very data models they were trying to use to frame me. They had fundamentally miscalculated. They thought they were playing chess with a pawn, not realizing the pawn had just been handed the entire board. The last email from Spot 47 was my new mission. Time to build the trapdoor. A trapdoor needs a frame. I was already logged into the system with Harlan's master H-side credentials. The entire digital kingdom of Kestrel and Larch was laid bare. I wasn't just in the archives. I was in the now. I started where all digital crimes are solved. The logs. I knew from my own research that the Larch line data had been simplified, fraudulently altered 3 nights ago, at 2:15 a.m., a time when no analyst, not even me, would be working. First, I pulled the server access logs for the Larchline project database. 2:15:04 a.m. Write command executed. Credentials. R. Carrington. IP address 10.0.1.47. My credentials. But that IP address wasn't my workstation. It wasn't even my floor. I traced it. The IP was hardwired to the internal network terminal in the Apex room, the glass cube. Second, I pulled the building's physical access logs. I queried all keycard usage for the 20th floor between 2 o'clock a.m. and 3 o'clock a.m., 2:14:12 a.m. Access granted. Location, 20F Apex entry, card holder, Denby. Sloan, 2:31:44 a.m. Access granted. Location, 20F Apex entry, card holder, Denby. Sloan. She badged in, executed the data alteration using my stolen credentials, and badged out. She sat in that soundproof glass box, visible to the entire empty atrium, and committed federal fraud. The arrogance was breathtaking. She was hiding in plain sight. But they were smarter than that, or so they thought. Third, I pulled the surveillance logs. The Apex room was the most watched space in the building, covered by 4 high-definition cameras. I navigated to the video archive for that date and time. File access denied. Archive empty. I frowned. That was impossible. I ran a diagnostic on the cameras themselves. They were active, recording. I checked the system admin logs. 2:01 a.m. System command. Action. Disable. 20F Atrium Cam 14. Requester. D. Pike. Reason. Energy Conservation Initiative. Power save mode. My blood ran cold. Energy conservation. A building that used enough electricity to power a small town. And Damon had personally requested a power save mode for 4 critical cameras. Precisely 15 minutes before Sloan arrived to commit the crime. It was perfect. Coordinated. Damon created the digital blackout. Sloan executed the act, using the one room she thought was both secure and symbolic, and they'd planted my credentials at the scene. Now for the simplified deck, the presentation they expected me to give. I went to the shared drive. There it was. Larchline Q3, board review. Final, PPTX. I checked the metadata. Author, R. Carrington, last modified. A tiny, stupid, fatal mistake. My system-wide username, the one linked to my credentials, was R. Carrington. Every document I ever saved was stamped with that. RC was a manual override. Someone had typed it in, thinking it looked like me, but they didn't understand the system. They were faking my signature. I used the HT card's archive access to pull the shadow copies from the server. The version saved automatically every 5 minutes. 2:10 a.m. version. My original, unaltered slides. The real data. The real risk assessment. 2:20 a.m. version. The simplified deck. The fraudulent numbers. I ran a forensic comparison of the 2 files, and there it was, the tell. In my original file, I had written a note. Risk model must be analyzed for non-U.S. market stress. In the fraudulent version, the note was edited to read, Risk model analyzed. Analyzed with a Z is the American spelling. Analyzed with an S is British. Sloan Denby was a graduate of the London School of Economics. She spent 10 years in our UK office before coming to Greyford. She still defaulted to British spellings in all her memos. She hadn't just faked my credentials. She'd left her own fingerprint, her own digital accent, all over the weapon. I had the how, I had the when, and I had the who. I sat back, the hum of the servers washing over me. I had enough. I could write an email to the board, attach the logs, the screenshots. I could blow the whistle, right now. Ping. A new email from Spot 47. Subject, hardware. Body, service stair. D, level B4, locker 047. My heart hammered. This wasn't just a digital hunt. I grabbed my bag, slipped out of the IT room, and back into the concrete artery of the building. The HC card opened every door. I moved through the guts of Kestrel and Larch, past massive HVAC units roaring like sleeping dragons, past electrical transformers that buzzed with latent power. This was the building Harlan knew, the building Sloan and Damon had forgotten. Level B4 was even colder and damper than B2. It smelled of limestone and old machinery. I found service stair D and a bank of battered, gray metal lockers. Locker 047. The lock wasn't electronic. It was a simple, old-fashioned 3-digit combination lock. I smiled. He's a showman. I spun the dials. 0, 4, 7. I pulled the latch. It clicked open with a sharp, metallic thunk. Inside, there was only one item, resting on the bare metal shelf. A brushed steel USB thumb drive. Etched onto its surface, small and precise, were the numerals, 47. I didn't plug it into my company laptop. I had a personal tablet in my bag, firewalled and air-gapped from the K&L network. I powered it on and slid the USB into the port. One drive, 2 files. The first was a video file. The Trap, MP4. I hit play. It was the video from the B2 garage, the one I'd seen a preview of. But this was the high-definition master. The audio was perfect. Sloan. Pin the whole damn thing on the kid. It's done, and we take the company. It was the kill shot. A confession, clean and indisputable. The second file was an audio file. Master backup. Wave. I played it. I heard the same conversation, the same words, but the quality was different. Richer, less echo, as if recorded from a different source. I listened as Sloan and Damon's footsteps faded, as the elevator dinged and the doors closed, and then, after 3 seconds of silence, tap, 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 the sound of Harlan's cane, striking the concrete floor, sharp, measured, triumphant. He hadn't just recorded them from the camera, he had been there, standing in the shadows, just out of frame, the microphone in his cane capturing a pristine, separate audio backup. He was a witness. He was the archive. I was ready. I had the digital logs, the keyboard forensics, and now the high-definition, audio-backed confession. I was going to burn them to the ground. I started composing the email in my head. To the independent directors of the board. Ping. My phone. Another email from Spot 47. Subject. Patients. Body. They are nervous. You skip their meeting. They think the scapegoat is spooked. Damon will be forced to call an emergency board meeting. He will summon you to the Apex room. He will try to accuse you first. Do not publish. Do not reveal your hand. Let them build the stage. Let them call the audience. Let them walk into the glass box themselves. This was the hardest part. He was asking me to wait, to walk back into the office, pretend I was nothing more than a spooked kid, and let them put the noose around their own necks. I was terrified, but I also understood. He didn't just want to win. He wanted a public execution. I had one last thread to pull, the why. They weren't just faking projections for stock hype. The conversation mentioned buy out the panicked shareholders. They were engineering a crash. Where had the real money gone? I went back to the IT room, back to the financials. I traced the Larchline project's expenditures, millions in consulting fees and strategic partnership payments, all wired to a single, opaque LLC registered in Delaware, a shell company. I ran the numbers, the inflated, fraudulent projections versus the actual, anemic revenue, the difference, the gap. I highlighted the final number on my screen. $4,700,000. My breath hitched. $4.7 million. 47. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't sloppy. It was arrogance, a signature, a private joke between Sloan and Damon. They were siphoning off millions, and they'd signed their crime with his number. I leaned back, the fluorescent light humming above me. Spot 47. Locker SAR 47. USB 47. $4.7 million. Harlan had seen it all. He had watched them build their entire conspiracy around his own legacy number, and now he was using it to guide me. He wanted me to see. He wanted me to understand the depth of their betrayal. He wanted them to walk into that glass room, high above the company, and find themselves standing on a trap door. And he had just handed me the lever. I was back at my desk by 11:30 a.m., my return to the grid, my login to the Kestrel and Larch network, must have lit up 100 alerts on Sloan's dashboard. I had been a digital ghost for almost 3 hours. The missed Apex meeting, the unanswered Slacks. I had acted exactly as the Spot 47 email predicted, like a spooked scapegoat. The flood of messages was frantic at first. Riley, Apex, now, then annoyed. Riley, this is unprofessional. Call me. Then, a shift. The final message, sent 10 minutes ago, was a complete change in temperature. The anger was gone, replaced by a cool, measured concern. Sloan Denby, I see you're back. My apologies. This Larchline push has us all on edge. I've overstepped. Let me make it up to you. Lunch? Just us. Lever. I'll book a table. Lever. The Glass. The company's 3 Michelin star restaurant on the 10th floor. It was where you went to be seen. It was another glass box, all white linen, polished silver, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rain-slicked atrium. Another stage. A moment later, a calendar invite popped up. Event, catch-up. Time, 12:47 p.m. My breath caught. 12:47, not 12:45, not 1 o'clock, 4, 7. This was the arrogance Harlan had counted on, the private joke. They were so confident in their conspiracy, so insulated by their power, that they were signing their movements with the very number they were stealing. My phone buzzed with a text from the unknown number, Spot 47. She's switching from the stick to the carrot. A bug is useless if the bribe isn't offered. She will offer, accept, document. P.S. Check your laptop bag. I furrowed my brow. I opened the side pouch of my bag, the one I hadn't touched all morning. My fingers brushed against something small, metal, and cold. I pulled it out. It was a key fob, a heavy matte black square, completely blank, with a leather strap. It looked like a high-end valet key, but I'd never seen it before. I pressed a tiny, recessed button on the side. A microscopic blue light glowed for a second. I recognized the design from a security catalog. It was a high-fidelity digital audio recorder, disguised as a meaningless accessory. Harlan, or one of his invisible allies, must have planted it on me during my time in the B-1 bunker. The old man didn't just have assets. He had access. I slipped it into my pocket. The carrot. I was ready for the carrot. Sloan was already at the table when I arrived at 12:47 on the dot. She was framed against the massive window, the gray, rainy light of the atrium creating a severe halo around her tightly pulled back hair. She was a portrait of executive concern. Riley, darling, thank you for coming. Her voice was warm, a calibrated performance for the nearby tables. Her bracelets clacked softly as she gestured for me to sit. I am so sorry about this morning. Damon, he gets intense. We all do. The pressure on this Larchline launch is immense. It's fine. Sloan, I was reviewing some legacy code, I said, my voice deliberately tired. I lost track of time. I understand completely, she smiled, that thin, sharp, unconvincing expression. You're our best analyst. That's why we put you on this. We trust you. The waiter, silent and dressed in black, poured water. The menu was absurd, full of foams, gels, and deconstructions. Food that pretended to be something it wasn't. I ordered a black coffee. Sloane ordered a celery root risotto with a fennel emulsion. "I'm glad we have this moment," she said, leaning forward, her voice dropping. "You and I, Riley, we have to navigate this place in a way men like Damon don't. He's a bulldozer. We're strategists." She paused, as if sharing a profound secret. "Woman to woman," she said, using the Vietnamese phrase she'd picked up on a business trip, a phrase she loved to deploy, as if woman to woman in another language gave it more weight. Sometimes, to protect the big picture, we have to be flexible. Her eyes held mine. This was it, the performance. "The numbers you found, that duplication, that was just a temporary placeholder, a model. But the story, the narrative of success, that's what's real. That's what secures the funding. That's what ensures our future, your future." The words hung in the air, light as the foam on her risotto, but heavy as lead. Be flexible. It was the same line from her office, but now it was coated in honey, served in an expensive restaurant. It was an invitation to be her accomplice. My response had to be perfect. I couldn't agree, and I couldn't refuse. I looked down, feigning a mix of confusion and pressure. I let out a shaky breath. It's my name on the report. Sloane, that's a lot of flexibility." "I know, and we appreciate that." My phone buzzed in my pocket, the pre-planned cue. "I'm sorry," I said, pulling my phone out. I glanced at the screen, the Spot 47 text. "Now, the bribe is coming." I put the phone on the table, face up. Then, as if it were an afterthought, I reached into my pocket. My battery is dying. I took out the key fob recorder and placed it on the table next to my phone. Stupid new OS. Sloane's eyes flicked to the phone, then the fob. Dismissing them both as technological clutter, her focus was entirely on me. She had me on the hook. I took a sharp, nervous sip of my water. Then, I slid my hand under the heavy granite table, my fingers fumbling as if I were looking for a power outlet. With a silent click, I pressed the record button on the fob. My hand came back up, and I placed the phone, face down, on top of the key fob. The mic was now perfectly positioned, shielded from view, capturing every word. "You're right to be cautious," Sloane said, her voice dropping even lower. She mistook my fumbling for pure nerves. She was closing the trap. "Your diligence is exactly why we value you, and we want to reward that." She took a delicate bite of her emulsion. "Damon and I have been discussing your compensation package. We feel you've been undervalued, given your contribution to Larchline." She placed her fork down, her bracelets making a sharp metallic sound. "There is a conditional performance bonus tied to the successful second-round funding of Larchline. It's substantial." She named a number. It wasn't just a bonus. It was a house. It was a new life. It was fuck you money. It was enough money to make a person flexible about anything. "All we need," she continued, her voice a soft, silken promise, "is your support on the presentation tonight. We need you to stand by the top-line data, confirm the projections, be the analyst we know you are, assure the board that else." My phone, lying face down on the table, vibrated. Bzzzt. The text from Spot 47 was blunt. "Agree, then document." I looked up at Sloane, widening my eyes. I let my jaw drop slightly. I was performing overwhelmed gratitude. "Sloane, I don't know what to say. That's—" I stammered, just as she'd expect the kid to stammer. "Yes, of course, I'll support the presentation. Whatever the team needs. Thank you." A smile, slow and genuine, spread across Sloane's face. It was a terrible, triumphant sight. The predator, having secured its meal. She had just bought my signature, my career, and my silence. She had just sealed the scapegoat's fate. "Excellent, Riley. I knew I could count on you." She sat back, the tension leaving her shoulders. The sale was complete. She signaled for the waiter. "I'll have an espresso and another coffee for my colleague." The coffee arrived. I lifted the cup, my hands steady. I took a sip. It was scalding hot, incredibly bitter, and I could taste nothing but metal. It tasted like the steel of the keycard in my pocket. It tasted like the 4.7 million they had siphoned into their shell company. It tasted like the cold, hard logic of revenge. Sloane finished her espresso, her good mood palpable. The crisis was averted. The kid was back in line. She placed her small cup on the saucer with a clink. Her hand rested on the table. Her silver and platinum bracelets clacking together as she tapped her fingers. Clack, jingle, tap. The sound was so specific. The sound was so cold. It wasn't a memory. It was a scar. I was 17, standing in the cold, marble foyer of my father's house. It was 2 days after his funeral. I was accusing Sloane of, I don't even remember, of being a gold digger, of never loving him, of being happy he was gone. I was just a kid, grieving and lashing out. She hadn't yelled. She had walked up to me, her face a mask of cold fury. She grabbed my upper arm, her fingers digging in, and she'd slapped me. It wasn't the palm that stung. It was the metal, the sheer, percussive weight of her bracelets catching me high on the cheekbone. A cold, metallic clack that split the skin. The first thing I felt wasn't pain, but the ice-cold shock of the silver, and the jingle as her hand recoiled. "You will never," she had whispered, her voice shaking with a rage I had never seen. "Speak to me that way again. You are nothing." Now, sitting across from me, she saw the flicker in my eyes, the change. "Something wrong, darling?" she asked, her smile tightening. "You look pale." I blinked, pulling myself back from the memory. I looked at her, at the bracelets that now represented a 7-figure bribe. I let my fake, grateful smile dissolve. My face went neutral. "Nothing," I said. My voice was quiet. I could hear myself breathing in the silent, glass-walled room. My silence was no longer a shield. It was a knife, being sharpened. "Just the coffee," I said, pushing the cup away. "It's bitter." Sloane's triumphant expression vanished. The mask of the COO snapped back into place. The temperature between us dropped 20 degrees. She knew the truce, the woman-to-woman moment, was over. "Right," she said, gathering her purse. "The Apex Room, 7:00 p.m. We'll present the simplified deck together." "I'll be there," I said. She stood, adjusting her jacket. She looked down at me, a final, cold assessment. "Don't be late." She walked away, her bracelets clack-jingle clacking on the marble floor. I sat alone at the table. The overture was finished. The bribe had been offered. The confession had been recorded. I reached for my phone and the key fob beneath it. I pressed the button to stop the recording. 7 p.m. The glass box in the sky. The stage was set. At 7:00 p.m., the city of Grayford was drowning in a storm. The rain wasn't falling. It was attacking. A torrential silver onslaught that turned the city lights into blurred, frantic watercolors. And high above it all, suspended in the central atrium on the 20th floor, the Apex Room glowed. It was a perfect cube of glass, a silent, illuminated stage hanging in the abyss, and the entire building was its audience. I was the last to arrive. The private elevator doors opened with a soft whoosh, and the scene was exactly as Spot 47 had predicted. Damon Pike, CEO, stood at the head of the long, black granite table, his back to the city skyline. He looked like a general, his broad shoulders filling his expensive suit. At his right hand, Sloane Denby, COO. She sat perfectly still, her silver bracelets coiled on the table in front of her, her face a mask of calm, executive concern. Next to her sat Marcus Thorne, our general counsel, a man who looked permanently uncomfortable, his eyes darting between his notes and the glass walls. And at the far end of the table, half hidden in the shadows, cast by the room's severe uplighting, sat Harlan Carrington, my grandfather. He was not looking at me. He was not looking at anyone. His gloved hands were resting on the head of his mahogany cane. He was staring out at the rain, as still as the granite he sat upon. His presence sucked the air from the room, creating a vacuum of static energy. Damon and Sloane didn't look at him. They clearly saw him as a prop, the senile founder present for a formality, a living embodiment of the legacy they were about to steal. They were focused on me. I could feel their collective tension. My failure to appear at the 5 p.m. meeting, my digital silence, had spooked them. They had to accelerate the timeline. They had to frame the kid tonight, before the kid could run to the press or the real SEC. This wasn't a meeting. It was a preemptive strike. "Riley," Damon began, his voice booming with a false, paternal disappointment. "Thank you for joining us. We've called this emergency session because of, frankly, a catastrophic discovery." He nodded to Sloane. With a single click, the massive wall-sized presentation screen lit up. And there it was, the simplified deck, the fraudulent larchline projections, and in the bottom corner of every slide, the author stamp, R. Carrington. "These are the projections you finalized for the second-round funding presentation," Damon continued, his voice dripping with gravitas. "As you know, we secured funding based on this data, your data." Sloane took over, her voice a masterclass in feigned betrayal. "We ran a final audit this afternoon. Riley, in preparation for the capital call." She clicked a button. The slides advanced, showing the raw data logs, highlighting the $4.7 million gap I had been meant to find. The numbers, they're not just wrong, they're invented, they're fraudulent. She looked at me, her eyes cold, performing for Marcus Thorne, for Harlan, for the invisible audience outside the glass. "Riley." "Darling," she said, the word darling dropping onto the granite table like a corrosive acid. "We've protected you. We've mentored you. We've given you every opportunity. And this is a betrayal of the highest order. Just tell us why." The trap was set. The scapegoat was in the cage. The knife was out. I said nothing. I walked past them, my footsteps echoing on the glass floor. I set my laptop down at the head of the console. "Riley, this isn't a debate," Damon snapped. "This is an explanation." I ignored him. I pulled the small, brushed steel USB drive from my pocket, the one etched with 47. I inserted it into the console. Damon and Sloane exchanged a confused, irritated glance. This wasn't in their script. "You're right. Sloane," I said. My voice was low, perfectly calm, and the microphone system in the table amplified it, making it sound like a judgment. "It is a betrayal." I hit the control panel. The main screen flashed, then split into 2 equal halves. On the left, their fraudulent deck. On the right, my own terminal, logged into the server archives with Harlan's master credentials. "The data was fabricated," I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "But you made mistakes." I brought up the metadata comparison. Mistake number 1, the author is R.C., manually typed. My system signature, as seen on every document I've ever created, is R. Carrington. You faked my name, but you faked it poorly. Sloane's eyes widened. Just a fraction. Mistake number 2. I pulled up the text comparison of the 2 slide decks. I highlighted the word. You spelled analyzed with an S. It's the British spelling. Sloane, I'm American. That's your accent, not mine. "This is ridiculous," Damon boomed, but there was a new tremor in his voice. Mistake number 3. I pulled up the server logs. The file was altered at 2:15 a.m. from an IP address hardwired to this room, the Apex. I looked at Sloane. "Let's check the physical access logs, shall we?" The log file appeared. 2:14 a.m. Access granted. Apex room. Cardholder, Sloane Denby. Sloane stopped breathing. "And mistake number 4, I said, my voice dropping. "The cover-up." I displayed the admin request from the surveillance system. "Damon Pike, You personally requested the 4 cameras covering this transparent room be shut down for energy conservation 10 minutes before Sloane arrived to frame me. Marcus Thorne, the lawyer, made a small gasping sound. He looked at Damon, horrified. This is circumstantial, Sloane said. Finding her voice, her bracelets jangled as she gripped the table. You hacked the system. You're trying to frame us. I don't need to, I said. You framed yourselves. You just did it in the wrong part of the building. I clicked a new file on the USB drive, the trap, MP4. The right side of the screen dissolved, replaced by the sickly green-lit footage of the B2 garage. Sloane and Damon, clear as day. And then, their voices, crisp and clear, filled the silent glass box. Sloane. Pin the whole damn thing on the kid. It's done, and we take the company. The color drained from Sloane's face. She looked like a marble statue. Damon looked like he was going to be sick. What is this? Marcus Thorne whispered, his eyes glued to the screen. This is a deep fake, Damon roared, surging to his feet. He was a bull, enraged and trapped. This is fabricated. Slander. You cannot use this. He spun on Marcus Thorne. This is illegal surveillance. It's inadmissible. He lunged for the console, his hand raised to smash the screen. Tap. The sound was sharp, definitive, like a gavel. Everyone froze. At the far end of the table, Harlan Carrington slowly lifted his cane and brought the metal tip down onto the glass floor a second time. Tap. A tiny green LED, recessed into the steel seam of the floor beneath his cane, flashed once. Damon stared at it, uncomprehending. Illegal, Mr. Pike? Harlan's voice was a dry, ancient rasp. He hadn't spoken until this exact moment. I think not. He turned his cold, gray eyes to Marcus Thorne. Counselor, you will recall Addendum C of the Executive Partnership Agreement, the one you filed in 2017, the Key Man Clause. Marcus Thorne's blood seemed to freeze. The Founder's Asset Protection Clause. Precisely, Harlan rasped. It grants the Founder, me, unrestricted rights to employ any and all means necessary to secure the company's assets and intellectual property. This building, he swept his hand out, is my asset. Your conversations about defrauding it are my property. Damon's face was ashen. You've been recording us. The cane, Harlan said, lifting it slightly, is merely a key. The building itself. The building listens. He tapped the floor 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. The room's primary speaker system crackled to life. It wasn't the video audio. It was something else. A montage. A greatest hits of their treason. Sloane's voice, from a month ago. The $4.7 million has been transferred. The Delaware shell is clean. Damon's voice, from 2 weeks ago. The anonymous SEC complaint is filed. It's airtight. It points right at the kid and the Larchline data. Sloane's voice, from last week. Harlan is senile. The board won't even question our motion to absorb his trust. It was a cascade of their own voices, their conspiracy, echoing from the ceiling. The glass box had become an echo chamber of their guilt. The building itself was testifying against them. The audio playback stopped. Absolute, profound silence. The only sound in the world was the silver rain, lashing against the glass walls, as if trying to get in. Sloane was staring at Harlan, her mouth slightly open. Her mask of perfect composure was not just cracked, it was shattered. She looked broken. Damon Pike had collapsed into his chair. He was breathing heavily, his eyes wide, his gaze fixed on the flashing green light in the floor. Marcus Thorne, the lawyer, slowly, deliberately, stood up. He adjusted his tie. He cleared his throat. It was the sound of the entire company shifting on its axis. The sound of allegiance and power. Transferring. The air was so tight it hummed, charged and dangerous. I walked to the vast glass wall, looking out at the storm, at the blurred city lights far below. I could see their reflections in the glass. The two panicked, trapped executives, the old silent predator at the end of the table. I turned back to face them. I looked directly at Sloane. "Radical transparency," I said. My voice was quiet, but it filled the entire, silent, glass-walled trap. Wasn't that the motto? I pointed at her reflection in the glass. "Let's let the glass reflect what it truly sees." My voice hung in the air, amplified by the room's hidden microphones. "Let's let the glass reflect what it truly sees." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, a pressurized void where the only sound was the furious, silver lash of the rain against the glass walls. Damon was a statue of rage. Sloane was porcelain, her face a mask of disbelief. Her eyes locked on the garage video still playing on the screen. Marcus Thorne, the lawyer, was sweating, his gaze fixed on the granite table. And at the far end, Harlan Carrington sat, unmoving. He watched them, the old predator, watching the younger, trapped ones. He wasn't smiling. His expression was one of profound, cold, clinical interest. He slowly, deliberately, reached into the pocket of his waistcoat. He didn't pull out a phone. He didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a single, ancient, silver dollar. He held it between his gloved thumb and forefinger. Then he spun it. The coin arced through the air, flashing under the cold lights as it tumbled end over end, landing on the granite table in front of Marcus Thorne. It spun, a silver blur, before rattling to a stop. Heads. It was a signal, the executioner's order. Thorne, his face pale, picked up the coin, looked at Harlan, and gave a single, terrified nod. He reached for his tablet. "You think this performance changes anything?" Damon finally snarled. Finding his voice, he pointed a thick finger at me. "You're done, Riley. You've admitted to hacking, slander, illegal surveillance." "It doesn't matter what you call it, Damon," I said. I was in control of the console. I rewound the garage video, the trap, MP4, to the 40-second mark. I hit play. The room was forced to listen again. Sloane's voice. "Damon, I'm not comfortable." Damon's voice. "I'm counting on it. Let her find it." The timestamp on the video ticked up. 0:45. 0:46. At the exact moment the timer hit 0:47, as Sloane's voice clearly said, "Pin the whole damn thing on the kid." Marcus Thorne, the lawyer, pressed enter on his tablet. A new window instantly hijacked the main presentation screen. It was not a video. It was a black system-level console, a live feed from the Kestrel and Larch Trust Administrator. Console. Clawback Protocol H.C. Initiated. 1924-47. Console. Trustee, CMD received. Ayuth, Thorne, M. Console. Executing. Sloane's and Damon's cell phones, sitting on the table, buzzed in perfect, terrible unison. The alerts lit up their locked screens. Citadel Private Bank. Your accounts have been frozen, pending a trustee investigation. Citadel Private Bank. Your access is locked. "What is this?" Sloane whispered, her hand hovering over her phone. "What did you do?" "I did nothing," Harlan rasped from the end of the table. It was the first time he'd spoken to them. "You did, 7 years ago, when you signed the executive compensation agreement. The clawback clause." Damon's face was purple. "That's for bankruptcy. You can't just—" "Section 4B, Harlan said, his voice cutting through the rain. "Gross financial misconduct, embezzlement, willful fraud. It triggers an immediate, total freeze of all compensation, salary, stock options, and bonuses. Retroactive 48 months. You were trying to steal my company, so I'm taking back my money. All of it." Console. Asset freeze complete. Pike. D. Console. Asset freeze complete. Denby. S. Console. Initiating sys access revocation. And it's not just your money, I said, my voice quiet. I brought up a second console, the building's live security log. Sys admin. Revoking all privileges. Pike. D. Reason. Bylaws. 11.4. Misconduct. Sys admin. Revoking all privileges. Denby. S. Reason. Bylaws. 11.4. Misconduct. Sys admin. All access cards deactivated. All network credentials locked. Sys admin. Status. Pending investigation. You, Damon choked out, pointing at me. You can't, you. He was vibrating with a rage so profound he couldn't form words. He wasn't a CEO. He was a cornered animal. He did the only thing he could think of. He ran. He lunged for the glass doors, the private elevator that had brought him to his stage. He slapped the control panel. Nothing. He fumbled for his wallet, ripped out his executive key card, the black, unlimited access card, and jammed it against the reader. A loud, piercing, final beep echoed through the room. The light on the reader flashed bright. Angry red. Access denied. He hit it again. Beep, red, and again. Beep, red. He was pounding his fist, his key card, against the glass door of his own trap. He was locked inside. Sloane watched him, her face a mask of pure, white horror, the physical manifestation of their defeat. They were prisoners in their own glass box. "You're not going anywhere," I said. I turned back to the main screen. The consoles faded. I brought up the financials. "You were so focused on the video. You forgot the real evidence, the why." I highlighted the ledger transfers. $4.7 million, siphoned from the Larchline R&D budget over 6 months, wired to a shell company in Delaware called Apex Strategic Partners. I glanced around the room. "You named your theft after this very room. The arrogance is astounding." Damon stopped pounding. He turned, his chest heaving, his face slick with sweat. "But you didn't just steal," I continued, my voice cold and clinical. A surgeon dissecting a corpse. "You covered it up, and you used other people." I brought up a new file, a scanned PDF. "This is the invoice for the emergency camera maintenance on the 20th floor, the maintenance that shut down the cameras for Sloane's 2 a.m. visit." I zoomed in. "It's a fake invoice, from a fake company, and you approved it." I never signed that," Sloane whispered, her first words of defense. "You're right," I said. "You didn't." I zoomed in on the signature line, the authorization for payment, A. Davies. "You made your executive assistant, Anne, sign it. You told her it was routine paperwork. You didn't just frame me. Sloane, you framed your own assistant to cover your tracks. You're burning everyone around you just to stay warm." Sloane actually flinched, as if I had thrown something at her. "Enough," Marcus Thorne said. His voice was hoarse. He stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. The lawyer reasserting control. He was reading from his tablet, but his voice was shaking. "Based on the evidence presented, which is, frankly, overwhelming, and pursuant to Kestrel and Larch bylaws, Section 11.4, any officer engaged in willful gross misconduct, including but not limited to fraud, embezzlement, or the intentional misrepresentation of company data, is subject to automatic and immediate suspension of all duties and privileges, pending a full board review." He looked, for the first time, directly at Damon, then at Sloane. "As of this moment, 7:27 p.m., you are both suspended, you have no authority, you will surrender all company property, security is on its way." This was the breaking point. For Sloane, it wasn't the money, it wasn't the job, it was the evidence, it was the loss of control. While Thorne was speaking, Sloane's eyes were not on him, they were locked on the small, steel USB drive I had just used, the 47 drive, the source of her destruction. In a single, fluid motion, she lunged across the table. It was not a plea, it was a grab. Her bracelets clacked violently as her hand shot out, her fingernails aimed at the USB port. "You will not destroy me with this," she shrieked. Her fingers were an inch away. I didn't move to block her. I didn't flinch. I simply plucked the USB drive from the port, an instant before her hand slammed down onto the empty console. She let out a strangled, furious gasp, her hand clawing at the empty port. I held the small steel drive up between my thumb and forefinger. "You still don't get it, do you, Sloane?" I said. "This isn't the evidence. This is just a key." With my other hand, I clicked a new icon on the desktop. A browser window opened, a secure, encrypted cloud vault. The screen filled with files. The Trap, MP4, Checksum, 3A4F, 31C. Master, Audio B2.wave, Checksum, 9B1C, A44, Financials, Shell Co, XLSX. Checksum, E0D2, B1F, Logs, Apex Access, TXT. Checksum, 55A9. C09, Sloan Bribe, Lunch, 1247.mp3, Checksum, 78E, 55E. Invoice, Cam Fake, PDF, Checksum, 22D1, F88. "It's all in the cloud," I said, my voice barely a whisper in the silent room. Time-stamped, hashed, and already in the possession of an independent third-party auditor, and the boards. I looked at her, at the raw, animalistic desperation in her eyes. "Even if you threw me from this window, it wouldn't matter. The truth is already out." Sloane slumped back into her chair, defeated, not just fired, but erased. Damon was staring at the red access-denied light, a broken, wheezing bull. The battle was over. The room was silent again, but for the rain. Harlan Carrington stood up. The movement was slow, methodical. He walked the full length of the table, his cane tapping softly on the glass floor. Tap, 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 a funeral dirge. He stopped next to me. He didn't look at Sloane or Damon. He looked only at me. His gray eyes were not cold. For the first time in my life, I saw something else in them. Respect. "When your father died," he said, his voice a low rasp, meant only for me. I thought the fire was gone, that the Carrington line had ended, that all I had left to protect was an inheritance. He nodded. Once, a small, sharp movement. "You kept the fire, Riley. You kept it well." He turned and walked to the elevator. He didn't use a keycard. He pressed his gloved thumb to a small, dark panel I'd never seen. It glowed green, and the elevator doors opened. Summoned by their master, he stepped in and was gone. Thorne was on his phone, his back to the room, speaking in low, urgent tones. "Yes, I need security on the 20th floor. Executive escort. Now." I was alone. I turned away from the wreckage, from the broken CEO and the catatonic COO. I walked back to the massive glass wall. The storm was at its peak, the rain hammering the building as if trying to wash it clean. I looked down at the city of Grayford, at the millions of lights, the wet black streets, the tiny crawling cars. They all looked like eyes, thousands and thousands of tiny illuminated eyes. And for the first time, they all felt like they were wide open. The glass doors to the Apex room remained locked. Marcus Thorne, his face the color of old parchment, was finishing his call. "Send them to 20. Now." He hung up, but the men who arrived moments later were not the standard building security. The private elevator, the one that had denied Damon, opened with a quiet ding, and 3 men in dark, perfectly fitted suits stepped out. They were not smiling. They were the men who protected Harlan's trust, not the building's lobby. They took up positions outside the glass, silent sentinels. Their message was clear. No one was leaving. Thorne, seeing them, nodded once. He turned back to the console, his hands shaking. The independent directors are on the line." He swiped his card. The main screen, which had been a collage of crime, flickered. It was replaced by a grid of 12 faces, a mosaic of the company's independent board members, patched in from New York, London, Tokyo, and Hong Kong. Their faces were not tense, they were furious. A woman at the center, Lila Vance, the lead independent chair, leaned into her camera. Her voice was digitally crisp, cutting through the heavy, humid air of the apex room. "Mr. Thorne, we have received your emergency packet. The auditor you and Mr. Carrington engaged is on a separate line. The files, the checksums are verified. The audio is verified." She looked past Thorne, her gaze finding me. "Ms. Carrington." "Yes, ma'am," I said. "This evidence is extensive. We see the logs, we see the timestamps, but we need to know, for the record, who compiled this? Who is the source?" The room was silent. Damon was staring at the floor, a broken bull. Sloane was staring at me, her face a mask of such profound, cold hatred it was almost beautiful. I took a breath. The evidence was compiled from the company's own secure systems. "Miss Vance, the systems that were built to ensure integrity," I paused, "and from a source who wishes to be identified, for the record, only as Spot 47. A murmur went through the remote directors. "Spot 47, Lila Vance repeated, confused. "That," Harlan Carrington's voice rasped from the end of the table, "would be me." The 12 faces on the screen snapped to the old man at the end of the table, their shock visible. They had all bought the story. The senile founder. "Harlan," Lila began, her voice suddenly softening. We were told you were unwell." Harlan smiled. It was a terrible, skeletal expression. "Dementia is a convenient fiction. Lila, it's a shield, a test, and a weapon." He leaned forward, his voice captured perfectly by the room's microphones, his words resonating with the quiet authority of a king. "I did not build Kestrel and Larch to be a story, a performance. I built it on granite and numbers, and for 5 years, I have watched these two." He gestured, not with anger, but with a kind of clinical detachment. "Turn my granite into glass, into a show." He looked at Damon. "You believed I was senile. You told the board I was senile. You wanted my voting shares, my trust, to be put under your control. Ms. Denby," he nodded at Sloane, "as my caring proxy. You made it easy," he said, his voice a low growl. "People are careless around the frail. They are careless around the senile. They hold their most honest conversations in garages. They sign their most fraudulent documents with arrogant little jokes." He tapped his cane. Tap. "They believe they are smart. They do not believe the walls can listen. But I built these walls, and I gave them ears." "I did not hunt for their fraud," Harlan concluded, his voice dropping. "I simply made them feel careless enough to reveal it themselves. I set the stage, and they walked right onto it." The board was speechless. Lila Vance looked like she had seen a ghost. She regained her composure, her face hardening. This was no longer a drama. It was a judicial proceeding. "Mr. Pike," she said, her voice like iron, "the evidence is conclusive. But for the record, I must ask, the shell company, Apex Strategic Partners, the $4.7 million transferred from the Larch Line project, can you explain these strategic consulting fees?" This was it. Damon's last stand. He visibly swelled, the bully persona returning for one final pathetic act of bluster. That is a classified strategic acquisition," he snarled. "A dark pool algorithm. It was a consulting arrangement. It is privileged." He was still lying. Even now, he was lying. I didn't speak. I simply went back to the console and brought up the final file. Shellbank Records, PDF. "The strategic consultants were very busy," I said, the screen filled with bank statements from the Delaware LLC. "The $4.7 million was wired in 6 separate payments." I highlighted the outflow column. and it was wired out, within 24 hours of each deposit, to this account. A new line of text filled the screen. Titania Holdings Limited, Grand Cayman, beneficial owner, D. Pike. You paid yourself, Damon, I said quietly. You stole $4.7 million in R&D funds and told your team the project was underperforming. What strategy was that, exactly? Damon Pike made a sound, a strangled, wet gasp. He sank into his chair, his face slick with sweat. He was done. Lila Vance turned her cold, digital gaze to Sloane. Ms. Denby, do you have anything to add? Sloane was a different animal. She didn't bluster. She didn't collapse. She was a reptile, cold and calculating to the end. She ignored the board. She ignored me. She looked past us all, down the long black table, at Harlan. Her voice, when it came, was not a shriek. It was a low, desperate, silver-toned plea. Harlan, please. She unclasped her hands, her bracelets jingle-clacking softly in the silence. This is a family company. This is our family. My husband, your son. He gave his life for this company. This is a mistake, a terrible mistake. But we can fix this. Internally. We don't need to destroy the name. Think of the family. Harlan. Think of what he would have wanted. She was using my father. She was holding the memory of my dead father up as a human shield. A white-hot chemical rage flooded my system. I cut her off. My voice was low, shaking, but clear as a bell. No. Sloane's head snapped toward me, shocked at the interruption. You don't get to use his name, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Not you. Not now. I looked at her, at the woman who had slapped me with those same bracelets, who had called me nothing after my father's funeral. This isn't a family mistake, Sloane. This is a multi-million-dollar, federal-level fraud. You didn't protect this family. You used it. You used his memory as a key to get close to the vault, and then you tried to frame his daughter, me, to cover your tracks and steal the rest. You are not family. You are a parasite. I turned to the board. The Carrington name doesn't cover this. No family name does. You want to talk about what my father would have wanted? He would have wanted the truth. He would have wanted the parasites burned out. The word burned hung in the air. Sloane stared at me, her mask gone. All that was left was the raw, empty hollow of her ambition. She had played her last card, and it was gone. Lila Vance had heard enough. This meeting of the board will now vote. Motion to immediately suspend Damon Pike and Sloane Denby of all duties, titles, and compensation, and to begin immediate criminal and civil proceedings. She didn't wait. Vance, yes. The face next to hers lit up. Akagi, yes. Mueller, yes. Patel, yes. It was a waterfall. Yes, yes, yes. 12 voices, one verdict. The motion passes, unanimously, Lila said. Mr. Thorne, you will execute. Already done, Madam Chair, Thorne said, his voice trembling. One last piece of business, Lila said. The company was now a ship without a captain or a first mate, in the middle of a storm. We have a crisis. The Larchline project is compromised. The company's leadership is vacant. Ms. Carrington. I stood straighter. Yes, ma'am. You are the lead analyst on this project. You are the only senior-level individual on that floor we can, at this moment, trust. The bylaws require a 30-day stabilization plan in the event of a leadership crisis. The board requires one now. What is your plan? Damon and Sloane were forced to sit there, suspended, powerless, and watch me take their place. I walked to the console. I closed the evidence files. I closed the bank statements. I closed the audio logs. I opened a new, blank presentation. One white slide. I typed one line, in the center, in the company's clean gray font. Radical transparency. Then, I hit enter and typed the second line, right below it. Not performance. I turned to the board. That's the 30-day plan. We stop performing. We stop managing the narrative. We stop lying. We open the books. We turn on all the cameras. We send a full, unredacted confession of this meeting to the SEC. Tonight, we tell the investors, the press, and our employees the truth, all of it. We take the hit, we clean the wound, and we start over. Alara Vance stared at the slide for a long, long time. Finally, she nodded. So be it. Execute the plan. Ms. Carrington. As she spoke, the private elevator dinged. The 3 men in suits outside the glass turned. The doors opened. 3 uniformed Kestrel and large security guards stepped out. The real ones. The ones Thorne had called. They looked confused, then terrified as they saw Harlan, Thorne, and the board on the screen. Tss. The head of Harlan's private detail stepped forward and spoke to the new guards. He was quiet, but his authority was absolute. The building guards nodded, their duty clear. The 3 uniformed guards walked, their boots heavy on the glass floor. They walked past me. They walked past Harlan. They stopped, 1 behind Damon's chair, 2 behind Sloane's. Mr. Pike, Ms. Denby, the head guard said, his voice devoid of emotion. You'll need to come with us. The board on the screen was silent, watching the transfer of power. Damon Pike stood, his $5,000 suit hanging on him like a shroud. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. Sloane stood, gathering her purse with a numb, mechanical dignity. She did not look at me. She did not look at Harlan. She just walked toward the door, a ghost in her own machine. The elevator doors closed, sealing them inside. They were gone. The board members on the screen nodded, one by one, and their video feeds clicked off. Click, click, click. The wall of faces went black. Marcus Thorne let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for a year. It was a ragged, painful sound. The apex room was finally, truly silent. On the glass floor, in the empty, sterile cube, there was no one left but me, Harlan, and a lawyer. Outside, the storm had quieted. There was only the sound of the rain, a gentle hissing, and, in the silence, the sound of the ragged, unsteady breathing of the men who were left to clean up the pieces. The descent from the apex room was a journey from a battlefield to the real world. I rode the private elevator down with Harlan and Marcus Thorne. The car was silent. The only sound was the faint whoosh of the hydraulics. We did not speak. We did not congratulate each other. The victory was a heavy, cold thing. Above us, the glass cube that had been our stage, our prison, and our tribunal went dark. Its performance was over. When the elevator doors slid open, they revealed a lobby in the full grip of contained chaos. The 3-story atrium, normally a sterile cathedral of white marble and silence, was buzzing like a disturbed hive. The news, I realized, hadn't just leaked, it had been released. Harlan's team, in the minutes we were descending, had detonated the story. A swarm of journalists, camera crews, and local media personalities was held back from the main floor by a set of emergency velvet ropes. They were a frantic, flashing mass of lenses and outstretched microphones. Our in-house PR team, led by a man named Jennings who had, until an hour ago, reported directly to Sloane, looked like survivors of a plane crash. Jennings saw our small group, Harlan, the silent titan, Thorne, the grim-faced lawyer, and me, the 29-year-old analyst who had just decapitated the company, and his face went white. He had been told to expect Damon and Sloane. He was prepared for the old narrative. He was completely, fatally unprepared for the new reality. He rushed over, his tablet held up like a trembling shield, his voice a panicked whisper. Ms. Carrington, ma'am, he stammered, completely wrong-footed. We have a situation. The press is, they're saying, what is the official message? What is our holding statement? What do I tell them? He was a man begging for a script, for a lie, for the simplified version. Behind him, the flashbulbs were like small, silent explosions, reflecting off the polished granite wall, Off the cold, carved letters of the company motto, Radical Transparency. I looked at Jennings, at his panicked, pleading face. He was a symptom of the old kestrel and larch, a man who managed the glass, not the granite. I didn't stop walking. I kept moving toward the main revolving doors, forcing him to walk backward in front of me, a frantic crab in a bespoke suit. "Mr. Jennings," I said. My voice was quiet, forcing him and the nearest microphones to lean in, to strain. The ambient buzz of the lobby died, a wave of silence rippling outward. "There is no holding statement," I said. "There is one message. You can quote me." I stopped. The entire lobby, the press, the security, everyone went silent. I looked past Jennings, past the blinding flashes, into the darkness of the rain-slicked street outside. "Don't let people trade their mistakes for your lessons." That was it. I said nothing else. Jennings stared at me, his mouth open, waiting for the rest, for the corporate spin, for the reassurance, for the jargon. There was none. I walked on. The press corps erupted in a single deafening roar of shouted questions. "Ms. Carrington, is Sloan Denby in custody?" What was Harlan Carrington's role? "Are you the new CEO? How deep does the fraud go?" I said nothing. I didn't look at them. I didn't stop. It was a single, clean cut. No emotional press conference. No tearful, triumphant speech. No long, drawn-out handshakes for the cameras. The battle had been won in the glass box. This was just the removal of the bodies. We reached the private side exit that led to the garage elevators. Marcus Thorne, looking exhausted, nodded to me once, his face grim. "Ms. Carrington, I have a long night." He veered off toward the legal wing, a man with a mountain of civil filings to climb. That left just me and Harlan, standing by the elevator that led to the B2 level. The air was cold, smelling of the storm and wet pavement. Harlan looked at me. His face was unreadable in the shadows of the alcove. He didn't offer a word of congratulations. The victory was its own reward. Instead, he did something else. He held out his cane, the heavy, mahogany and silver cane, the microphone, the key, the weapon, the scepter. I looked at it, then at him. "Take it," he rasped. My hand was shaking, just slightly, but I took it. The weight of it was shocking. It was heavy, perfectly balanced, and solid. It was the weight of the company, the weight of his trust, the weight of power. I held it for a single, long beat. My fingers gripped the polished silver kestrel head, which was still warm from his glove. It was a current of static electricity, a silent, formal, profound transfer. Then, just as quickly, he took it back. His gloved hand closed over mine for a fraction of a second, his grip surprisingly strong, before he slid the cane from my grasp. "The building listens, Riley," he said, his voice a low growl. "Never forget how to listen back." He turned and disappeared into the elevator. The doors closed, and he was gone. I stood there for a long moment, the feeling of the cane's grip still imprinted on my palm. Then I went to my own car. I didn't go home. I couldn't. The adrenaline was a chemical fire in my veins. The war was over, but the work was just beginning. I went back up, not to the apex, not to the executive floor, which was now a sealed tomb. I went to my own desk, on the 14th floor, in the open-plan bullpen. It was nearly 9 p.m. The floor was dark, a graveyard of empty ergonomic chairs, the only light coming from the glowing blue server indicators and the city lights outside. I sat down. I was still, officially, R. Carrington, lead analyst, but I was the one with the 30-day plan. I was the one Lila Vance had tasked with the execution. I opened a new memo, the recipient, all employees K&L Global, the subject, radical transparency, not performance. The memo was 3 paragraphs. It was the opposite of every corporate communication we had ever sent. It was not simplified. It was not streamlined. It was brutal. As of 7:27 p.m. tonight, Damon Pike and Sloan Denby have been suspended of all duties. pending a criminal investigation into gross financial misconduct, embezzlement, and fraud. My 30-day stabilization plan, approved by the board, is not a plan, it is a policy. It is this: all non-essential, non-privacy-related internal surveillance cameras, including all cameras covering executive suites and common areas, are to be reactivated, effective immediately. All footage will be logged and archived. 2. Effective immediately. All clean desk and ephemeral log. AT policies are revoked. All document revisions, server access logs, and chat histories will now be permanently logged and non-deletable. Every dashboard, every spreadsheet, every presentation will now have a visible, unalterable, last modified by and viewed by stamp. We will own our work. We will own our data. 3. We will be fully transparent with the SEC and the press. We will tell the truth, and we will take the consequences. The storm will be severe, but we will survive it by being granite, not glass. More to come, R. Carrington. I hit send. The whoosh of the email going out to 10,000 employees felt like a cannon shot in the silent office. My work was just beginning. I spent the next 2 hours on the phone with the head of IT, a man named Sal, who, it turned out, was a Harlan loyalist from the old days. He was almost giddy. You want permanent logs, Ms. Carrington? You want visible user stamps on all dashboards? You want the executive privacy filters on the network sniffers turned off? I want it all on. Sal, I want the building's digital lights turned on, I said. Merry Christmas, he replied, and the line went dead. An hour later, my terminal lit up with notifications, a system-wide patch. I opened the Larchline dashboard, my dashboard, and there, next to the data I had bled for, was a new, small, gray tag. Data presented by R. Carrington. It was beautiful. My next call was to accounting. I found the budget line item that Sloan had used for executive suite and atrium enhancement. It was a massive, opaque discretionary fund, the fund she and Damon used for the Apex Room's $100,000 granite table, the Michelin star restaurant, the private elevators. I rerouted it, all of it, the entire 7-figure budget, the new destination, internal audit and whistleblower protection fund. The glass and granite decorations were over. The age of the auditors had begun. It was almost midnight. The adrenaline was finally fading, leaving a deep, profound ache in my bones. I packed my laptop. The floor was still empty, but it felt different. It felt clean. I rode the elevator down to the garage, B2. The sickly green neon light flickered. The air was cold, damp. I walked to my car, parked in spot 47. I stopped. The small metal plaque was still bolted to the wall. R. Carrington. Spot 47. My name, my spot, the place where the war had begun. It felt wrong. It felt like the old world. I went to my car's trunk. I kept a toolkit for emergencies. I found a multi-head screwdriver. The plaque was held on with 2 standard bolts. It took me less than a minute. The metal screeched in the silent garage as I loosened them. I pulled the plaque off the wall. My name. I held it in my hand. Then I tossed it into the back seat. I went back to the trunk. I had a Dymo label maker, the industrial kind. I stood there, in the green light, the smell of concrete in the air. I typed. The machine whirred and spat out a thick, black, plastic-coated label. I peeled the back off and slapped it onto the wall where my name had been. The adhesive stuck instantly to the cold concrete. The new plaque read, Spot 47. Shared for whistleblowers. It was a statement, a promise, a memorial. I got in my car. I was so tired I could barely turn the key. My phone, which had been silent for hours, vibrated in my jacket pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from the unknown number, the Spot 47 number. One last message. You passed. I stared at the 2 words, a wave of, not triumph, but relief. So profound, it was almost painful, washed over me. And then, as I watched, The message blurred. A new text appeared in the thread, replacing the old one. This number is no longer in service. Message history has been erased. The entire thread, the warnings, the breadcrumbs, the hardware locations, the final "you passed," it all dissolved. The contact Spot 47 vanished from my phone. The mission was over. The account was closed. Harlan Carrington had deleted his digital ghost. I was on my own. I put the phone down, started the car, and pulled out of the garage, leaving the empty, newly christened Spot 47 behind me, a silent beacon in the green. Flickering light. It was past midnight. The memo was sent, the digital equivalent of a citywide blackout, or a citywide illumination, depending on your perspective. The digital bombs had been detonated. 10,000 employees across the globe were, at this exact moment, opening an email that would fundamentally change their world. The gossip, the shock, the terror, the dawning realization. It was a tidal wave of information I had just unleashed, and I could feel the silent, digital scream of it even in the tomb-like quiet of the 14th floor. My adrenaline was gone, leaving behind a cold, hollow exhaustion that felt like it had settled directly into my bones. The fight was over. The cleanup, my 30-day stabilization plan, was just beginning, but it could wait until morning. For now, I just needed air. I packed my bag, my movements slow, robotic. I walked out of the bullpen. My footsteps on the polished concrete floor were the only sound, an impossibly loud click-clack in the darkness. The entire building felt different. It was no longer a stage for a performance. It felt like a library after closing, a place of records, a place of truth. The glass walls of the empty offices seemed to reflect my silhouette with a new, stark clarity. I took the elevator down, not to the lobby, but to the subterranean levels, to B2. The doors opened, and the air that hit me was not the sickly, humid, green-lit air of the test. The air was cool, dry, and clean. The storm had passed, and the ventilation system was pulling in the cold. Post-rain night. The oppressive, flickering green neons were off. In their place, the standard, bright, clinical white fluorescent lights were on, humming with a steady, shadowless intensity. My new policy: turn on the lights. The wet concrete floor, which had been a sea of oily, green-tinged puddles, was now just a floor. The thinned, leftover moisture from the storm reflected the bright white lights above, making the pavement look like a sheet of clean, wet slate. Everything was sharp, defined. There were no more shadows to hide in. I walked toward my section, my footsteps echoing. I was heading to my old sedan, my mind already rehearsing the drive home, the glass of water I would drink, the 5 or 6 hours of sleep I might get before the world truly erupted. And I stopped. In the center of my vision, parked perfectly between the lines, was the black monolithic SUV. It was sitting in Spot 47. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel fear. I didn't even feel surprise. A strange, profound sense of calm settled over me. Of course, this was not an epilogue. This was the final signature, the closing of the loop. I walked forward until I was standing just a few feet from the driver's side door, in the exact same spot where I had stood not 24 hours ago, a lifetime ago. I didn't knock. I didn't speak. I just waited. The black-tinted glass was a perfect mirror in the white light. I saw myself, pale, exhausted, my hair coming undone, my suit jacket rumpled, the lead analyst who had just burned down the kingdom. Then, with that same, impossibly slow, silent electric whine, the window lowered. Harlan Carrington was inside. He was not in his formal suit. He was in his overcoat, his gloves on, his hat pulled low. He looked, once again, like a shadow. He looked at me. His steel-gray eyes, no longer hidden in the green gloom, were sharp. They were piercing. They scanned my face, my eyes, my posture. He was reading me, one last time. He was looking for tremors, for doubt, for fear, for the triumphalism of a victor. I gave him none of it. I just met his gaze. I was too tired to perform, too tired to be anything but what I was, the one who had finished the job. He did not speak. The silence in the garage was absolute, a heavy, cold blanket. Then he nodded. It was not a small nod. It was not a greeting. It was a slow, deep, deliberate inclination of his head, his chin dropping an inch, holding for a beat, and rising again. It was a gesture of profound, complete, and silent acknowledgement. It was a congratulations from a man who despised the word. It was a well done from a master craftsman. It was the "you passed" text message, delivered with the weight of his entire 80-year-old will. I had kept the fire. He had seen it. My hand went into my jacket pocket. My fingers closed around the cold, heavy, brushed steel key card, the H.C. card, the skeleton key to the building's soul, the one he had given me in the elevator, the one that had opened the archives, the one that had allowed me to build the trapdoor. The mission was over. The account was closed. I pulled it out and held it out to him, offering it back. His gloved hand came up. I expected him to take it, but he didn't. His fingers, covered in soft, black leather, did not close around the card. Instead, he placed his index finger on the top edge of the card, and with a single, firm, definitive motion, he slid it back, pushing it flat against my own open palm. "Keep it," he rasped. His voice was low, final. I closed my fingers around the card, the metal already warming to my skin. "The test is over, Riley," he said, and the sound of my name in his mouth was still a shock. "But there will be others. There are always others." He looked past me, into the white-lit emptiness of the garage. "Next time," he said, his voice dropping, "you'll be the one testing them." I felt the weight of the card in my hand. It was no longer a key. It was a badge of office. The office of the exterminator. The office of the one who listens. His other hand, the one inside the car, moved. I heard the sound. The one that was now a part of my DNA. Tap, tap, tap. His cane, striking the floor of the SUV. And high above, on the concrete pillar, the small, circular override light, the one I had first seen as a threat, flashed, not red, it flashed green, once, a single, bright, verdant wink. The clinical white lights of my new, transparent world were on, but the green light, his light, was still there. The building's secret heart was still beating. He was reminding me that the building still listened. He had just handed me its ears. I didn't speak. I didn't say thank you. I didn't need to. I just nodded. Once, accepting the card, the role, the entire, heavy burden. I opened the door to my own car. The old, familiar sedan. I slid inside. The smell that hit me was not the cedar and expensive leather of his mobile throne. It was the smell of my own life, damp metal from the rain, the faint, worn scent of my own old leather seats, and something else, something sharp and electric, like ozone after a lightning strike. It was the smell of a battle, just concluded. I sat there, my key in my hand. I didn't need a parade. I didn't need a press conference. I didn't need applause or a promotion or a new title. The victory was this, the silence, the cold, heavy card in my fist, the single, green wink from the building's eye, the slow, deep nod from the only man whose opinion in this entire vast corporation had ever mattered. This was what a clean cut felt like. Across the lane, the black-tinted window of the SUV began to rise, the silent, electric whine sealing him away. The glass became a mirror again, and he was gone. The SUV's engine, which had been so quiet I hadn't even heard it, rumbled to life. Its white reverse lights flashed, stark against the concrete. It backed up, swung into the far lane, and drove, not fast, but with a deliberate, funereal pace, toward the exit ramp. It disappeared. I was alone. The garage was empty, but for my car, Spot 47 was vacant. I looked at the space. My eyes went to the wall, where my new, stark, black and white label was, and then I looked down, at the floor, There, in the bright, harsh, white light, faded from years of tires and rain and salt, but still unmistakably there, was the stenciled paint, R. Carrington. My name, the one I had inherited, the one they had tried to steal, to frame, to bury under their own fraud. It was still there, the granite foundation. I looked at the faded white letters, and for the first time in a long, long time, I smiled. It was short, it was brief, and it was finished. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We're so glad to have you here with us. We would absolutely love to know where you're listening from. So please drop a comment below and let us know what part of the world you're tuning in from. Let's connect and share our thoughts on the story. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. And to help this story reach even more people, please support us by hitting that hype button. It makes a huge difference. We'll see you in the next one.